The Russian invasion found the characters of our film in a country cooperative 15 kilometers from Kharkiv. They could no longer return home and were forced to witness both the barbaric shelling of our city by the Russians and the looting of populated areas in the region. During the occupation, the characters together dreamed of returning home. The road home for Ihor and Vadym was several thousand kilometers across Europe. And for 72-year-old Oleksandr, 14 kilometers away, at night, across the front line, under racist fire, to the forward Ukrainian border. For an elderly person with a pacemaker and a sick heart, this is a real feat. Oleksandr also harmed the Russians by seizing a submachine gun from their tankmans, which he handed over to the Ukrainian law enforcement officers after the liberation of Borshchova.
I loaded the car on February 23rd. The weather was good, and I went to live in the country. This is the cottage cooperative Crystal. It is located in the direction of the villages of Liptsi, Borshchova, near the reservoir. So, in February 2022, we were in the country. In fact, we lived there. My wife and I are registered in Saltivka, but we actually live in Borshchova. We live in our country house all the time. And our chairman lived there all the time this year. He knocks in the morning, it's still dark, he says, "Sasha, the war has begun." I say, "It can't be like that." We climbed onto the concrete road near us. We see an awful lot of rockets flying towards Kharkiv from the direction of Belgorod. Russian tanks drove past us. Then armored personnel carriers with the Russian flag. One drove through a concrete road. The second drove through a swamp and fired a burst from a heavy machine gun, just to shoot. And the cars were no longer allowed out. After 40 minutes, it was no longer possible to go towards Kharkov. The Russians did not let cars through. And then a lot of military equipment came in, but not in our country village, but on the edge of the village, closer to the highway, and finally, closer to the reservoir. The shelling of Kharkov began, day and night. Anti-aircraft guns, Grad missile launchers, day and night. It is 500 meters from the highway to our house. The fighting was going on along the road. There, the Russians lined up and started shooting at Kharkiv. Grad missile launchers could be heard. Rockets were flying. Maybe Grad, maybe Uragan.
Both witnesses from the northern suburbs of Kharkiv, temporarily occupied in 2022, and residents of the city itself confirm with one voice the massive shelling of the regional center by Russian artillery and rockets, the cruelty and senselessness destruction by the Russians of entire Kharkov districts.
What was the point of shooting at residential buildings? And they shot precisely from the ring road, from the Tsiokuni side, because, as you can see, the windows of the apartment in that direction. And we saw all this, and the hits on our house were also all from there.
On the basis of tanks, without a tower, self-propelled artillery installations. There were 5 of them. An armored personnel carrier is with them. According to the rules, 3 or 4 shots were fired, and they drove, changing positions. The Russians were standing to the right of us, 500 meters away if you look at Kharkiv. They shot back with Grad, left, self-propelled drive up. In fact, they fired by the Grad only from this heel. The self-propelled guns, they drove on a concrete road to the Murom reservoir.
On March 7th, a projectile flew into our apartment. Everything caught fire, from which the apartment burned to the ground. At that time, we were in the basement. There were also more attacks on our house. A rocket was sticking out on the roof. Then it was pulled out. There was shelling, and a rocket was sticking out from the 8th floor, which was stuck in the wall. As you can see, many of our apartments have burned down.
Well, a month later we saw for the first time how ours destroyed 5 of these self-propelled guns at once. They drove as a goose, and the armored personnel carrier with them apparently is a commander. Visibility is good across the river from the hill. They were standing there, and we hear from Kharkiv it's quiet, then it's like a clap, and then an explosion. One tank caught fire, then the second, third, and so quickly. And then we look. They also got into the armored personnel carrier. And the difference is that the smoke from the armored personnel carrier is black. The tire is on fire. So it's interesting. No one came to pick up the corpses. There were 3 people in each car, plus an armored personnel carrier. That's where they must be lying.
The Russians did not hesitate to shoot at local residents from a tank for fun.
In front of us are swampy meadows, and the Russian army could not pass. They occupied Russky Tishki and Cherkassky Tishki. My house is the highest on the hill. We started heating the stove so as not to freeze. I see. A Russian tank pulls up in front of our house, stops across Cherkassky Tishki, across the meadows, and starts shooting at my wife and me. But not in the house for sure, because if they wanted to kill us, they would have targeted us. And then near the garage, our cars flew apart, behind the house, then next to it in the garden, 30 meters, and into the neighbor's chicken coop. We have understood so that smoke does not come from the pipe, and the neighbor's pipe was smoking. That's why they hit him on the chicken coop to cover the pipes.
The Russky Mir was remembered by the residents of Kharkiv region for the rest of their lives with Russian banditry, looting, robberies, and the aimless destruction of their property.
Every day? Well, it was mainly the military of the LPR, DPR, the first ones we saw. In 2 weeks, they began to break down the doors of summer cottages with crowbars. First, they looked for alcohol and cigarettes, and then they began to take away everything they could. These are mainly electrical appliances and the like. And every evening, there were no leaves. The frost was strong. Every evening, they had an onboard UAZ. They loaded it all, took it out in the direction of Lipsy, probably to Belgorod, every God's day. And then a column of beautiful yellow agricultural machines left. Property of Ukrainian farmers, probably. They gathered them in a pile, and the whole column drove past us. The street closest to the highway from us had several nice houses with garages. Apparently there were pits, lifts, so they brought generators there and dismantled all these stolen cars there and then transported all of it to Russia. And in our cooperative, we broke the houses that were closer to the road. We heard this terrible crack both at night and during the day. After a few days, I noticed that they were pulling everything from these houses. And then it reached an industrial scale. These Ural trucks were carrying shells to Tishki in the morning. Shells were being unloaded. We heard the sound of shell boxes breaking. That is, they were preparing for the next shelling. These Urals on the way back already stopped at our cooperative, and not only ours, most likely. They loaded furniture, appliances, however. Everything they liked. I climbed the mountain to those streets several times. Robbery, robbery. Traces of this Ural, which did not fit into the country road. He was just driving, pressing fences, broken windows, doors. I actually observed all these traces. There was a robbery. These are mainly LPR and DPR, these troops. They are Russian, but it was clear from the conversation that it was them. So what kind of bastards? Now I'll tell you. One kept pigeons near us. I tell Sasha to head of the cooperative. I will go and open the castle at night. I will release the pigeons. Sashko says, it's not necessary anymore. I ask, what is it? He answers, an armored personnel carrier stopped. These bastards left these purebred pigeons in a bag and ate them.
This war diametrically changed the outlook of our characters and their attitude towards Russia and Russians.
I used to go fishing to Borshchova. There, one shore is Russian, the other is Ukrainian. And I perceived Russians as normal people. But when it all started, bandits were in front of me. Russians are not soldiers, but bandits. Bandits. Fraudsters, rascals, alcoholics, and first of all, marauders. The Russians had set up a shooting range and were apparently sitting idly by. So they shot fences with machine guns and houses with grenade launchers. Such a roar, holes in the walls. Because I say, they are animals. I could never think, because we have heard about any soldier, Germans, fascists from movies. And these are even worse. Many people say that the Germans would not allow such a thing as the Russians.
I cannot call them either humans, non-humans, or neighbors. I don't know, these are some creatures on two legs. I am an old woman. I tried to analyze the memories of the Second World War. Those who survived it say that the fascists did not do that. They were kind of more sensible or something. They did not destroy everything they see like that. Everything I see, I must destroy. Everyone I see, I must kill, I must mock him. Why do they have such hatred for our people? But I can definitely say that these are non-humans, only creatures without intelligence, without civilization, without a future.
I don't know how it is possible to live side by side now, or build a fence, as in Israel. However, I don't know. The country is huge, but they are all sick, a sick society. Because to applaud that our people are being killed, well, how is it? Can a normal person do it?